welcome to the King Pair Podcast. I'm Stuff, and with me today is LBK. How are you doing?
I'm good, buddy. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, I guess, considering what just happened.
Mhm.
All right, so we're here to talk about one thing, and pretty much one thing only: match the India-Pakistan Asia Cup match. So, what are your immediate thoughts on that result?
I think purely speaking, result-wise, obviously it was good for Indians, but I think there's a chance that there's a lot of questions running in the mind, especially how the top order did. Regarding that, there's some doubts, and obviously the bowling was good through and through, but the last 6 or 7 balls or so where we let the last pair score some runs was a bit of a bit of an area of concern, but outside of that it was pretty good. And I think from a general fans point of view, I think everyone enjoyed the game, and that is what matters the most.
Yeah, the atmosphere in Dubai definitely seemed quite good. I went to the one of the games in 2018 for the ODI Asia Cup that was there, and I enjoyed myself. But like the atmosphere at the ground, well, generally was quite enjoyable. Like it just felt like there was something missing because the ground wasn't quite full and it was very hot as well because it started around the same time of year. I think that tournament was in September. It was either September or early October, so it was still quite hot outside, and the matches had to start in the middle of the day. So it wasn't like the best atmosphere to watch cricket. It just seemed like it was a lot better this time around. So that was definitely nice to see. And I know like the biggest problem people have with cricket in the UAE is that it's very lifeless and no fans. It's always boring. That's not always the case. And especially for India Pakistan games, like they always get people to turn out unless it's like super hot. Nobody wants to go. In which case, there's not a game in the world that'll sell out there. Yeah, going on to the match itself. Uh, what do you think of the two batting performances? What are the key things you like to point out?
First of all, coming up to the Pakistan batting performance, I think obviously there was some lack of intent here and there, but it is at least understandable because of how the pitch was doing. It was pretty slow, and shot making seemed kind of tough. But still, I think there was no excuse, especially from the point of view that they have played on this pitch. As I said in the preview, that they come off with a lot of experience playing in UAE. I mean, obviously, some of them comparatively have lesser amount of experience than others, but still there's Rizwan, Babar, even I think Iftikhar has played. So obviously that could not be used as an excuse to not be aggressive, at least at the end, when there was a time to get going. Obviously the Pacers were relatively easier to play in the end compared to the fast bowlers. I mean, we saw the same in Indian innings as well. I think what separated those two innings quality wise was the fact that India were backing themselves while Pakistan seemed a little hesitant, which can obviously be connected to the fact that when you bat first you want to get the biggest possible score, while when you bat second you have to score a certain amount of runs, and if you think you can do them, then you'll obviously look much calmer than the team that batted first.
Yeah, so going on the point about playing in the UAE, I don't talk about this in the preview, but like I don't think Pakistan's players have that much more experience than some of India's players do, honestly, because India has hosted pretty much two full seasons of the IPL in the UAE not that long ago, and the IPL is a longer tournament than the PSL. So quite a few of these Indian players, I think probably more of the Indian players have played more matches in the UAE than the Pakistan team has. Um, yeah, like you said, like both teams they started quite slowly because the pitch was a little took a little while to get used to. The difference ended up being that India had that firepower at the end with Pandya and even some of Jadeja's strikes right before he got out. Well, Pakistan just never got that. Iftikhar threatened a little bit, Shadab threatened a little bit, Rauf and Dahani threatened a little bit, but by that point it was way too late. Um, Yeah, like India had that late impetus that Pakistan just lacked. Some of that
And
probably is down to some of the experience of the players involved. India's lower order is quite a bit more experienced at this than Pakistan's is.
I think one factor that I want to speak out for, especially for the Pakistan team, and it is obviously the whole captain thing, and because obviously the captain's intent or captain's approach towards the game obviously rubs off on the team, as we saw with India. I mean, Rohit Sharma's captaincy was really good, in the first innings, and we saw similar things with the middle order, Ravindra Jadeja, there was Hardik Pandya, and even Surya Kumar Yadav. They were relatively calmer. But if you see that, on Pakistan's side, then it felt like Babar Azam is kind of a messy captain from what see. I mean, he's not obviously a bad captain. He has got some great resources at his disposal, and he has obviously maneuvered them well, as we saw yesterday. I mean, that is why the game went so close. But he kind of feels like he let things go once Kohli was dismissed. I mean, at halfway mark in India's batting, they were what, 62 for 3, and it still looked like India were pretty much in control, because Pakistan didn't seem to want to apply a lot of pressure, and they were like just going through the motions at one point. I think it was looking like they just want to to the get to the death and bring in the pacers, which they ultimately did. Although there was one over remaining by Mohammad Nawaz, but I think it was a little too late for that to happen. Yes, it was. The over that could have been taken out much earlier, and maybe used to apply more pressure was kind of thrown in at the end. As I guess that didn't pay off, but that kind the kind of captaincy that Babar did yesterday. I mean, he did some great things, a lot of stuff early on pretty well, but kind of go when when the pressure was on.
I don't think Babar's captaincy was that bad because the reason we ended up with Nawaz bowling an over at the end was because he gave Naseem an over in the middle after that really good opening spell he had, and it just didn't pay off because Naseem didn't get a wicket in that over in the middle, which left one over at the end for someone else for Nawaz to bowl. Um, yeah, like so, some of the luck just didn't fall Pakistan's way. That dropped catch of Kohli early on, if that had been taken, that would have really put a huge hole in India's momentum, even more than Rahul's ball dismissal. Like if India were 1 for 2 in the first over, that would have been quite different from being 50 for 2 a few overs later. Yeah, like Babar is still like a much less experienced captain. I don't think it was quite as bad as you're making out, but yeah, he still has some ways to go.
I mean, I'm obviously not saying that he is outright bad or anything. It is more of a situation where it is an attribute of his captaincy that is, there's a part that is still obviously notable. As you said, he does not have that much of an experience as a lot of his counterparts do. I mean, obviously, Rohit Sharma has a lot of experience, so has Aaron Finch, and almost every captain in this Kane Williamson. So obviously, he is kind of much less experienced than his counterparts, and it kind of showed. I mean, that is pretty much my whole point. To be honest, it is not something that outright makes him a bad captain, but it is something that needs a lot of work, I guess, which kind of might come off with captaining more, or maybe trying out different stuff than probably what he did yesterday, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point. So moving on, we were talking about this a little before we started recording, but one key difference between the two sides ended up being the quality, or maybe not the quality, but the performance of the all-rounders on the day. So what do you make of that?
I think one thing that I have seen with Pakistan, and it has been, I think, quite a long while, it is that they either get really good all-rounders, right off the bat, someone like Abdul Razak who comes in at a very young age and takes over, or even Shadab Khan. But uh, what I have seen from their management is that they do not seem to trust their all-rounders a lot. I mean, obviously, even with Shadab Khan's batting, even though they have seen him do well, uh, it doesn't look like they have shown his trust in him. I mean, yesterday we saw Jadeja come up for a specific purpose. That was, I think, there could have been times where they could have sent Shadab Khan to do similar things. Even Fahim Ashraf now. I mean, he has obviously fallen down in the ladder now. I think he was the part of T20 team at one point. But I think that has been one problem with Pakistan, that they do not seem to trust their all rounders a lot, and obviously it hurts their confidence a bit, and it showed yesterday, I guess.
Yeah, one advantage India had was that they had an extra bowling option, which Pakistan didn't. Pakistan's sixth bowler would have been Iftikhar Ahmad or Khushdil, and neither of those are particularly attractive options in case they needed an extra bowler. So I was actually watching this game with a Canadian friend of mine. I was explaining to him like the bowler restrictions, and this was as Naseem almost like had to walk off the field injured midway through his over. And I realized that we don't have an extra bowler to bowl the three balls that we trust. Like an injured Naseem would still have been our best option to bowl those three balls when giving it to some other guy because we just simply didn't have a six bowler in the team. So I don't think that's necessarily bad tactics. That's the selection we want to go for. We want to pick our five best bowlers, so we don't need a six bowler at all. But in such a situation as in the UAE where it can get very hot, very sweaty, players can cramp up and that'll make things difficult. In such a situation, it probably wouldn't have hurt to have an extra bowling option. And that's sort of what Pakistan have lacked lately, especially with Hafiz and Shoaib Malik going off the deep end, because they were decent six bowling options that would have definitely been passable at the very least. But at this point, Pakistan just doesn't have that, whereas India did. And I thought Jadeja bowled quite well, but he was only needed for 2 overs because some of the other options were doing better. And then when it comes to the batting, India's batting, lower order batting, really tested. But Jadeja was able to be moved up the order to fill in that left-hand batting slot, as a stopgap, which is something Pakistan again don't have. While Dahani and Rauf and Shadab all batted quite well, they're not necessarily players that I would trust to make those runs. I honestly thought we were getting bowled out for under 130 when Dahani walked out, but then he hits two sixes at the end and almost drags us to 150. But that's not something I would reliably depend on him to do. Whereas with players like Jadeja and Pandya, you would expect them more often than not to bowl a few decent overs and bat a few decent overs as well.
I think this point came up in the preview as well. Remember, I told how India has gotten a lot of practice this year. I mean, they have played in Ireland, they have played in England, they have played in India, they have played in West Indies. So I think the biggest point that obviously comes off with having played a lot of games is that you get to test people, you get to see what they can do, and maybe put them in some situations where they might be under the pump. As we saw with Avesh Khan, as more or less that guy that you talked about, who completes that fifth bowler quota with Ravindra Jadeja. And I think that was a really good thing for India, because ultimately he came through with the wicket of Fakhar Zaman. And I mean, it showed, as you said, there's you can seriously not trust someone like Haris Rao for the Hani to do it for you every time with the bat. But I think India did what they can. I mean, they had tested out their batting already. There had been some tough conditions here and there in West Indies, and even in Ireland, the conditions were a little tough early on. There was some games in India where the ball was slowing a bit. So I think India had tested out everything and they were ready to go. While Pakistan, obviously, since they have not played a lot of games, they had a little bit of their concerns, and ultimately their approach was kind of, the show shot approach to, have the have the five best bowlers in the team, and let's hope nothing goes wrong. Something like what happened with Naseem at the end. They were hoping that something like this won't happen and they can go through with the five bowlers. And I guess that is what affected their chances, I guess.
Yeah, this is another good point. Pakistan came into this match pretty much doing what had worked for them at the World Cup, and that's Pakistan's last point of reference because they haven't played many T20 since the World Cup. So they went into this match with basically the same sort of approach: top heavy batting. Hopefully, the middle order gets some quick runs at the end, and if not, well, just hope and pray on the bowlers. And the bowling strategy was the same as it was in the World Cup, where you used five bowlers the whole way through. And sometimes it pays off, sometimes it didn't. But yeah, like a big difference between Pakistan and India since the World Cup is that India have had to throw all their preparation in the garbage since the World Cup because whatever they were doing at the World Cup didn't work. So they've had a lot of T20 since then to try out new players, to try out new strategies. They have a new coach. Pakistan has the same coach, Saqlain Mushtaq, that they did at the World Cup. And well, India's Dravid now, so they're trying some new things, trying new players and all that. And this Asia Cup, I think, is the first time India have probably been close to full strength since the last World Cup. So seeing the way they want to play, now that they've tried out new people and can pick from the best of the best, minus Bumrah who's injured, but more or less they have, nobody's been rested for this tournament. This is India's strongest side minus the injuries. So they're playing the way they want to play, and it worked for them this time around. So we'll see, if they can stick with it.
Now that you have brought out the point of trying out, I think that has been, as just a while ago, as I brought out the point of the all-rounder for Pakistan. Another issue with their management, I guess, so that they do not want to invest in a middle order, I guess. I mean, there's people, going through that revolving door. Someone comes in, someone goes out. There's Iftikhar, sometimes there's Heather Ali, there used to be Muhammad Hafiz, I don't know. At some point, maybe Umar Akmal and Shehzad came back for a series or two, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't
that was in
yeah, that was, I think,
2019, like right
oh yeah,
after the
3 or 4
2019 World
years
Cup.
ago. Yeah, yeah. So that seems, like that kind of puts them in a really bad public eye because it always seems like you either happen to stumble upon someone good like Babar Azam or Rizwan, or either you have almost nothing kind of situation, where it seems like that management is doing almost nothing, and it is the players that come upon once in a while, as I said, like Babar Azam or Rizwan or Fakhr Zaman, even Imam ul Haq or Shadab Khan. Else you just end up using whatever you have and just keep traversing through through your list of uh, his 10 middle order players. Let's try them out four at a time kind of situation.
Yeah, I think that's a problem any down to Pakistan's schedule because we don't play as many T20s as India does. So when we do get some T20s to play, the problem now becomes: do we use this to try and solidify our style for the big event coming up, or do we try out some new players and put off the preparations for later? But in Pakistan's case, there aren't that many later moments to come, whereas India has a ton of them. So if Pakistan was able to play games against Ireland, Zimbabwe, and the West Indies all in the same year, right before a World Cup, or right before an Asia Cup and a World Cup, then they probably could have tried out a bit more. But Pakistan hasn't had that, and it's just it's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. It's not necessarily anybody's fault, but it is an interesting point about how the differences in schedules can really affect the way you prepare for things. Okay, so moving on now, what's next for both these teams and for the Asia Cup in general? So I think today is Bangladesh, Afghanistan, and then is the next game India, Hong Kong, or Pakistan, Hong Kong? So,
I think it's India versus Hong Kong first on
okay.
on the 31st.
Okay, so you have India, Hong Kong first, and then Pakistan, Hong Kong after that, with the Bangladesh Sri Lanka game in between. So like the funny thing about this Asia Cup format is that we made a whole preview video for the India Pakistan game. There's been a lot of build up for this India Pakistan game. It doesn't actually matter honestly. The important game is next week, the one they play next week. Assuming Hong Kong doesn't beat either of these teams, they will be playing again next week, and that'll be the game that actually matters more because that have more direct effect on a final. And even then, you could argue that that game won't really matter either if Pakistan and India both beat the two teams in the other group. So really, we have two India-Pakistan games that don't matter leading up to one that does matter, which is the one in the Asia Cup final. Again, getting ahead of myself, that might not happen because I expected that to happen last time, and it didn't happen because Pakistan lost to Bangladesh. But them's the breaks. But yeah, like after all this build-up, this game doesn't really matter that much, does it?
You know what I would love to see? Maybe India trying out their bench in the game against Hong Kong and maybe losing. That would be pretty interesting. I mean, obviously, Pakistan versus Hong Kong is still pretty skewed game. I mean, Pakistan holds a lot of experience in these conditions, and Sharjah is Sharjah, as you know. What happens in Sharjah, that is pretty much your knowledge. So, just to make the game a little more spicy, a little more interesting, if India loses the game against Hong Kong, I think the whole thing would kind of be more fun than it looks right now. As you said, people are still expecting Pakistan to obviously qualify for the Super Four, and even the Super Four game has kind of does not have that much of a spice right now because everyone feels like Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, or even Afghanistan are not as strong as India and Pakistan. Obviously, there was, even though people were expecting the India-Pakistan final in 2018 Asia Cup, but you could see the difference between the team qualities back then, and it is the same case, but exactly opposite now. I mean, Pakistan ranks much higher as far as team quality goes, so that is much of a not much of a big deal right now. So I guess there could be things that could be happening that can make the tournament more fun, or maybe we have not seen Bangladesh, although you were not expecting big things from him. Maybe they'll show some big things, and maybe the tournament will then become much more interesting, I guess.
Yeah, if India loses to Hong Kong, which I don't think is going to happen, the best chance for that was the ODI 4 years ago. But I can't see Hong Kong doing that again this time. But if India does lose to Hong Kong, depending on the margin, that could actually put India in the most danger because India only won this match with 2 balls left. If India loses by a bigger margin than that to Hong Kong, then a narrow Pakistan win, I think, would knock India out instead of Pakistan or Hong Kong, which would be, quite the surprise. But, again, I don't think it's going to happen. I think India wins that game, and I think Pakistan beats Hong Kong quite. The more interestingly set up group is the other one, especially the Bangladesh Sri Lanka game at the end, because I think Bangladesh probably loses to Afghanistan today. But we'll see in 12 hours, 11 hours, how that goes. But yeah, the Bangladesh Sri Lanka game coming up, that'll probably be the most interesting one, because I imagine that'll just be a straight shootout for the Super 4 stage. But yeah, then after that we have the Super 4s, and like I've said before, I really dislike this format, but what can you do? They need to make sure as many India-Pakistan games happen as possible, and according to a lot of the casuals I was seeing talking about this game, that's the popular opinion, is that this format is good, and whoever came up with it is a genius. So yeah, that's where we're at as a sport. Yeah, but anyways, this was it's about it for now because we recorded this pretty much 24 hours after the last podcast, so there hasn't been that much going on. Yeah, any final words?
Nothing much, I guess. We were entertained thoroughly yesterday, and I hope we keep getting that in this Asia Cup as it was last time.
Yeah, it's Asia Cup is, I think, an underrated tournament. A lot of people dismiss it, even the PCB, BCCI, SLC, BCB, they all dismiss it too, which is why this tournament is held this year, not last year. But it's a lot of great matchups at the Asia Cup. They always come around, and here's hoping the rest of this tournament is pretty good too.
Okay, so I guess that is it for today.
Yeah, I think that's going to be it for today. Thank you so much for listening to us babble on, and we'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.